At 7:30 on the morning of September 18th, 1944, Private First Class Elwood Kincaid pressed his body against a coral outcrop on WWII Island, watching Japanese machine gun fire tear apart the Marines to his left. 19 years old. 3 days on this island. 0 confirmed kills. 150 yards of open ground stretched between Elwood and 35 Japanese soldiers fortified inside reinforced concrete. The mathematics were brutal. A man running at full combat speed covers roughly 15 yards per second. 150 yards meant 10 seconds of exposure. The Japanese Type 92 heavy machine gun fired 450 rounds per minute. In 10 seconds, a single gun could put 75 bullets into that kill zone. The pillbox had 2 machine guns. No Marine could survive that crossing. The officers knew it. The sergeants knew it. Elwood Kincaid knew it. But Elwood also knew something else. He knew that every minute his platoon stayed pinned down, more men would die. He knew the left flank had to move or the entire advance would collapse. And he knew that waiting for a solution that might never come was just another way of dying. If you want to see how Elwood's impossible assault turned out, please hit that like button. Every like helps this story reach more viewers who need to hear it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. This is a true story, every detail verified, every number confirmed. The man was real. The heroism was real. Back to Elwood. The landing craft's ramp dropped at 06:15 on September 15, 1944. The first thing Elwood noticed was the sound. Not the naval bombardment that had been pounding WWII for 3 days. Not the roar of Corsair fighters strafing the beaches. The sound that caught his attention was silence. No Japanese fire. Nothing. Major General William Rupertus had briefed the 1st Marine Division the night before. 4 days, he told them. Secure the island in 4 days. Back on the ships by the weekend. Intelligence reported maybe 10,000 Japanese defenders under Colonel Kunio Nakagawa. Standard tactics. Banzai charges. Suicidal rushes into American machine gun fire. The Marines had seen it at Tarawa. They had seen it at Saipan. They expected it here. The silence was wrong. Elwood stepped off the ramp into waist-deep water. The Browning automatic rifle on his shoulder weighed 19 pounds, fully loaded. He'd trained with it for 6 months at Camp Pendleton, knew how to strip it blindfolded, knew the gas-operated firing system, knew it fired 30 caliber rounds at 550 per minute. He'd never fired it at another human being. The beach was white coral rock baked hard by the Pacific sun. Not sand, not dirt. Volcanic coral that had crystallized over millions of years into formations sharp enough to shred boot leather. The Marines moved inland in formation. 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards. Still no fire. Elwood's company reached the airfield perimeter at 06:45. That's when the world exploded. Japanese artillery opened up from positions the naval bombardment hadn't touched. Not from the beaches, from inland, from coral ridges honeycombed with caves and concrete bunkers that American shells couldn't penetrate. Colonel Nakagawa had let the Marines land, let them bunch up, let them move into the killing zone. Then he opened fire. The Marine to Elwood's left simply ceased to exist. One moment running, next moment gone, replaced by red mist and pieces of uniform. Elwood hit the ground. His training said, move. His body wouldn't respond. He pressed himself against the coral and tried to become invisible. Kid, breathe. Someone grabbed Elwood's collar and dragged him into a shell crater. Private First Class Bert Thatcher, 21 years old, Montana ranch country. 3 inches taller than Elwood and 50 pounds heavier, all of it muscle from throwing hay bales since age 12. "Just breathe," Bert said. "In and out. That's all you got to do right now." Elwood's hands shook. The bar lay across his lap. He hadn't fired a single round. "I couldn't," Elwood started. "First time's always hardest," Bert said. "Happened to me at Tarawa. Froze up for maybe 30 seconds. Felt like 30 years. Artillery shells walked across the beach behind them. Each explosion lifted coral chunks the size of footballs 20 feet into the air. The chunks came down like bombs themselves. A piece hit the crater rim 3 feet from Elwood's head. He flinched. "You from Oregon, right?" Bert asked. "Bend. Your dad was Navy, boiler tech, USS Arizona, December 7th. Bert nodded. Didn't say he was sorry. Elwood appreciated that. He was tired of people saying sorry. "Then you know why you're here," Bert said. "Your dad didn't get to fight back." "You're going to fight back for him." The shelling eased. Officers started shouting orders. The company reorganized and pushed inland. By nightfall, the 1st Marine Division had taken the airfield. The cost was 1,300 casualties, dead and wounded, in one day. General Rupertus had promised 4 days total. He was wrong by 70 days. Colonel Nakagawa had built a fortress. His 10,000 defenders waited in caves and concrete bunkers connected by 500 yards of tunnels. The tunnels let Japanese soldiers move between positions without exposing themselves to American fire. Attack one bunker and defenders could retreat through underground passages, reappear 50 yards away, counterattack from an unexpected angle. The Marines called the defensive positions pillboxes, reinforced concrete structures with walls 3 feet thick, steel-reinforced roofs, multiple firing slits giving overlapping fields of fire. Each pillbox protected its neighbors. Attack 1 and 2 more cut you down from the flanks. Elwood's platoon assaulted 3 pillboxes on the morning of September 16th. 40 Marines. 3 concrete structures. The math should have favored the attackers. It didn't. The first pillbox sat at the base of a coral ridge. 5 Japanese soldiers inside. 2 Type 92 heavy machine guns. The platoon tried grenades. The grenades bounced off the concrete walls and exploded harmlessly in the open. They tried rifle fire. 30 caliber rounds sparked against concrete and ricocheted into the coral. They tried rushing the firing slits. Sergeant David Parker led that rush, made it 15 yards before a burst from the Type 92 caught him across the chest. The 7.7mm rounds from the Japanese gun were roughly equivalent to American .30 caliber. Roughly. The difference was the Type 92 fired from a fixed position with interlocking fire support. Parker went down. 2 Marines tried to pull him back. The machine gun killed them both. Lieutenant Graham Holloway called off the assault. The platoon pulled back 200 yards and dug in. Artillery pounded the pillbox for 30 minutes. When the shells stopped falling, the Marines advanced again. The pillbox was intact. The Japanese inside were alive, and they were still shooting. It took 6 hours to kill 5 Japanese soldiers. The platoon used satchel charges. 40 pounds of Composition C2 plastic explosive on a pole. A Marine private named Jensen volunteered to plant the charge. He made it to the pillbox wall, set the timer, started running back. The explosion caught him anyway. The blast wave traveling through air moves faster than a man can run. Jensen survived but lost his hearing permanently. The 2nd and 3rd pillboxes cost the platoon 23 more men. By nightfall on September 16th, Elwood's platoon was down to 17 effectives. 40 men to 17 in 36 hours. Elwood still hadn't fired his weapon in combat. That night, lying in a foxhole with Bert Thatcher, He finally admitted it. "I see them in the firing slits," Elwood said. "I know they're trying to kill me, but I can't pull the trigger." "You hit the ground when the shooting started," Bert said. "That's smart. Most guys who die because they don't get down fast enough." "I'm a coward." "No, you're smart. There's a difference. My father died fighting. I can't even fire my weapon." Bert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your father died in a boiler room when a bomb went through the deck. He probably never saw what killed him. That's not fighting. That's just dying. You're still alive. That counts for something." Elwood wanted to believe that. He wasn't sure he did. September 18th dawned clear and hot. The temperature would hit 105 degrees by noon. Marines were already showing signs of heat exhaustion. Water was scarce. Resupply ships couldn't reach the beaches because Japanese artillery still controlled the southern approaches. The 7th Marines Elwood's regiment had pushed into the southern sector. Their mission was to clear the Japanese defensive positions, blocking the advance toward the airfield. The problem was 12 pillboxes arranged in a half-moon arc across the southern peninsula. Lieutenant Holloway gathered the platoon at 0700. 17 men left out of 40. They looked like walking dead. Uniforms stiff with dried sweat and coral dust. Faces gaunt from 3 days of minimal food and water. Eyes hollow from lack of sleep. 12 pillboxes, Holloway said. He pointed at a hand-drawn map. Arranged in overlapping positions, each one supports its neighbors. Command estimates between 5 and 35 enemy soldiers per structure. Someone asked about tanks. Terrain won't support armor, Holloway said. Coral ridges too steep, approaches too narrow. Artillery. Can't fire without hitting our own positions. The platoon went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Someone had to cross open ground, reach those pillboxes and destroy them at close range. The Japanese inside would see them coming. The mathematics were brutal. Holloway looked at his map. The centerpiece is here. He tapped a position. Largest pillbox. Estimated 35 enemy inside. 2 heavy machine guns. Multiple firing slits. Controls the entire southern approach. We take that position, the others become vulnerable. "How do we take it?" Bert asked. Holloway didn't answer immediately. He studied the map, like it might reveal a solution if he stared long enough. "We need a volunteer," he finally said. "Someone to make the approach. Plant charges, 1 man, small target, fast mover." Nobody spoke. "I can't order this," Holloway continued. "The survival rate is effectively 0. I'm asking for a volunteer." The silence stretched. Then Elwood Kincaid stood up. The M1918 Browning automatic rifle was never designed to be fired from the hip. John Browning designed it in 1917 as a walking fire weapon. A soldier would advance across no man's land in World War I, firing the BAR from his shoulder to suppress enemy trenches. By 1944, doctrine had changed. The BAR became a squad automatic weapon, fired from the prone position using a bipod. Accuracy was the goal, controlled bursts, conservation of ammunition. Elwood Kincaid was about to use it wrong. The weapon weighed 19 pounds, fully loaded with a 20-round magazine. Gas-operated, air-cooled. The bolt cycled 550 times per minute when the trigger was depressed. Each round was a .30 caliber 150 grain full metal jacket traveling at 2,800 feet per second. At 100 yards fired from a stable position, the BAR could put all 20 rounds into a 2-foot circle. From the hip, while running, accuracy dropped to maybe 20%. 1 round in 5 would hit a man-sized target. But accuracy wasn't the point. Volume of fire was the point. Suppression was the point. Making the enemy duck was the point. Elwood had 40 rounds, 2 magazines. That gave him maybe 8 seconds of sustained fire. 8 seconds to cross 150 yards. The M15 white phosphorus grenade entered service in 1943. Military designation WP soldiers called it Willie Peter. The grenade contained 15 ounces of white phosphorus in a sheet metal body. Upon detonation, the phosphorus ignited spontaneously when exposed to air. Burning temperature 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. White phosphorus burns through human skin in seconds, burns through muscle, burns down to bone. Water doesn't extinguish it. Trying to put out phosphorus with water can make it worse. The burning fragments stick to wet skin and continue burning. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 restricted use of white phosphorus as an anti-personnel weapon. By 1944, most nations ignored that restriction. The Japanese certainly did. So did the Americans. Elwood carried 4 WP grenades in his pack, 4 grenades that could create hell inside a concrete box. The plastic explosive known as C2 was the predecessor to the more famous C4. Developed in 1943, C2 had the consistency of modeling clay. A soldier could shape it, mold it, press it into crevices. The explosive power was roughly 1.5 times that of TNT. 40 pounds of C2 equaled 60 pounds of TNT. The blast radius in open air was roughly 100 feet. Inside a confined space like a pillbox, the overpressure wave would be catastrophic. The explosion would consume all oxygen in the enclosed space. Anyone inside would die from overpressure before they burned. C2 required a blasting cap to detonate. Standard military caps had a 30-second fuse. 30 seconds from activation to detonation. A man had to set the charge, activate the fuse, and get clear. Running. Always running. Lieutenant Holloway pulled Elwood aside 20 minutes before the assault. "You don't have to do this," Holloway said. "Yes, sir, I do." "Why?" Elwood looked at the 17 men left in the platoon, men who'd been 40 strong 3 days ago, men who were dying because they couldn't advance, because the pillboxes controlled the terrain, because someone had to break the defensive line or everyone would die right here. "Because if I don't go, 200 men die in this sector," Elwood said. "If I go, only I die." "That's not. It's mathematics, sir. 1 versus 200. The equation's pretty clear." Holloway studied the 19-year-old private. "Where you from, Kincaid?" "Bend, Oregon, sir." "Your father?" "Boiler Tech, USS Arizona." Holloway nodded slowly. Understanding settled in his eyes. "Your mother know you're doing this?" "No, sir, and I'd appreciate it if she never finds out." "What's her name?" "Dorothy Kincaid. She works at the shipyard in Portland. Welding." "What do you want me to tell her?" "That I did my job, sir." Holloway extended his hand. Elwood shook it. The lieutenant's grip was firm, steady, the grip of a man who'd already written the after-action report in his head. Who knew exactly what he'd tell Dorothy Kincaid? Elwood loaded his Browning automatic rifle with a fresh 20-round magazine. He stuffed his pockets with as many grenades as he could carry. 4 white phosphorus grenades, 2 fragmentation grenades. The weight pulled at his web gear. He adjusted the straps. Bert Thatcher approached. "Kid." "Don't," Elwood said. "Just gonna say good luck." "I don't believe in luck." "Then what do you believe in?" Elwood looked at the 150 yards of open coral between his position and the pillbox. The morning sun was already climbing, temperature already passing 100 degrees. Heat shimmer rose from the white rock. "I believe someone has to go first," Elwood said. He didn't wait for permission, didn't ask Lieutenant Holloway for the final order, didn't coordinate with the Marines on his right flank. He simply stood up and ran. The Browning automatic rifle weighed 19 pounds fully loaded. Elwood carried it at hip level as he sprinted across the coral. The bar fired 30 caliber rounds at a rate of 550 per minute. It was not accurate when fired from the hip. But accuracy was not the point. The Japanese in the pillbox saw him immediately. Their Type 92 heavy machine guns swiveled toward the running Marine. Bullets cracked past Elwood's head. Coral chips exploded around his feet. The air filled with the sound of Japanese automatic weapons. Elwood fired back without stopping. He kept the BAR's trigger pressed and swept the muzzle across the pillbox's firing slit. His bullets would not penetrate 3 feet of concrete. They would not kill anyone inside, but they would force the Japanese gunners to duck. They would buy him seconds, and seconds were all he needed. The distance closed. 100 yards, 80 yards, 60 yards. Elwood's magazine ran dry. He dropped behind a coral boulder, slammed in a fresh magazine, and ran again. The Japanese gunners had recovered. Their fire intensified. Bullets kicked up coral dust inches from Elwood's boots. 40 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards. At close range, the geometry of the pillbox worked against its defenders. The firing slits that gave the Japanese such excellent fields of fire also limited their angles. Elwood reached the blind spot directly beside the main aperture. The Japanese inside could hear him. They could not shoot him. Elwood had carried more than just ammunition in his pockets. He had brought white phosphorus grenades. He pulled the pin on his first WP grenade and shoved it through the firing slit. The screaming started immediately. White phosphorus burns at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It ignites on contact with air and cannot be extinguished with water. Japanese soldiers stumbled out of the pillbox with their uniforms on fire. Their ammunition belts began cooking off bullets exploding around their waists. Elwood shot them as they emerged. His BAR cut them down before they could raise their weapons. 8 men came out burning. 8 men died in the coral outside their concrete fortress. But 35 men occupied that pillbox. Phosphorus alone would not kill them all. Some had retreated deeper into the structure. Some were already returning fire through secondary apertures. Elwood grabbed the explosive charges. 40 pounds of composition C2 plastic explosive. He had a 30-second time fuse. He had one chance to place the charge correctly. He shoved the entire package through the main firing slit. Then he ran. Elwood dove into a shell crater 20 yards from the pillbox. He curled into the fetal position. He covered his head with his arms and pressed his body against the coral. The explosion lifted the pillbox off its foundation. Concrete logs and body parts flew 60 feet into the air. The blast wave slammed into Elwood's crater. Debris rained down around him. A piece of concrete the size of a football landed inches from his head. When the dust settled, the pillbox was gone. 35 Japanese soldiers were dead. Elwood Kincaid stood up. His ears rang. His hands shook. His uniform was covered in coral dust and blood. Some of it was probably his own. He couldn't tell. But he was alive. And 200 yards ahead, 11 more pillboxes still poured fire into the Marine lines. The logical thing to do was return to his platoon. Report success. Let someone else handle the remaining positions. Let men with more experience, more firepower, more support take over. Elwood Kincaid did not do the logical thing. He reloaded his BAR, checked his remaining grenades, and started walking toward the next pillbox. Behind him, Lieutenant Holloway was screaming into the radio. "Kincaid just took the center position. I say again, one Marine just destroyed the center pillbox. He's advancing on the second position." The regimental commander's voice came back. "Say again your last, Holloway. Did you say one Marine?" "Affirmative, sir. Private First Class Elwood Kincaid. He's not stopping." There was a long pause on the radio. Then, "Someone get that kid support, now." But Elwood was already gone. moving through the coral ridges toward pillbox number 2. Alone. 19 years old. 3 days on Peleliu. 35 confirmed kills in the last 90 seconds. And he wasn't finished. The second pillbox sat 80 yards northwest of the first, smaller than the main bunker. 5 Japanese soldiers inside, 2 machine guns covering the approach from different angles. Elwood had lost the element of surprise. The Japanese in the remaining 11 positions had heard the explosion. They had seen their largest bunker disappear in a column of smoke and debris. They knew an American was coming, and they were ready. Elwood used the terrain. Peleliu's coral ridges created natural channels between positions. A man who knew how to read the ground could move from cover to cover without exposing himself to more than one pillbox at a time. Elwood had spent 3 days watching how the Japanese defensive network operated. He understood their blind spots. He approached the second bunker from its eastern flank. The coral here rose in jagged formations that blocked the firing slit's angle. Elwood crawled the last 30 yards on his belly, dragging his BAR through the volcanic rock. The coral cut his forearms. He ignored it. The Japanese inside heard him. They could not see him. They began throwing grenades blindly over the bunker wall. Japanese Type 97 hand grenades had a 4-second fuse. Elwood counted the explosions, waited for the pause between throws, then moved. 3 yards. Stop. Wait for the next grenade. Move again. He reached the bunker wall and pressed his back against the concrete. His white phosphorus grenades were gone, used on the first position. He still carried fragmentation grenades. He still carried his BAR. And he had learned something from the first assault. Japanese pillboxes had ventilation shafts, small openings in the roof designed to prevent carbon monoxide buildup from weapons fire. The shafts were only 4 inches wide, too small for a grenade, not too small for a rifle barrel. Elwood climbed onto the bunker roof. The concrete was hot enough to burn his hands. He found the ventilation shaft. He shoved the muzzle of his BAR into the opening and emptied an entire magazine straight down. The .30 caliber rounds ricocheted inside the concrete box. There was nowhere to hide from bullets bouncing off walls at unpredictable angles. The ricochets created a killing zone more effective than any grenade. Japanese soldiers died where they stood. Elwood reloaded and fired again, 20 more rounds into the darkness below. When he dropped back to the ground, no one inside was moving. 2 pillboxes down, 10 remaining. It had been 7 minutes since Elwood stood up and started running. The third and fourth positions sat close together, mutually supporting. Each one covered the other's approach. Standard Japanese defensive doctrine. Kill the men attacking your neighbor. Elwood could not assault one without being shot by the other. He solved the problem with geometry. The 2 bunkers faced southwest toward the marine lines. Their firing slits covered a 120-degree arc, but directly between them a narrow corridor existed where neither bunker could bring its weapons to bear. The corridor was only 8 feet wide. A man would have to move through it perfectly straight. Any deviation left or right would put him in one bunker's field of fire. The corridor was 40 yards long, 5 seconds of exposure moving at combat speed. Elwood ran the corridor at full sprint. His boots hammered against coral. His breathing came in gasps. The heat was crushing. 107 degrees now. Sweat poured down his face. His uniform was soaked through. He reached the third bunker before its defenders could reposition their guns. He jammed his bar into the firing slit and fired until the magazine clicked empty. He threw his last fragmentation grenade through the aperture. The explosion was muffled, contained within concrete walls. Then he moved to the fourth bunker and repeated the process. Magazine empty. Reload. Fire. The Japanese inside never had time to adjust their defensive positions. 4 pillboxes destroyed. Approximately 55 Japanese soldiers dead. Elwood had been fighting for less than 20 minutes. His ammunition was running low. His BAR had jammed twice from overheating. The barrel was so hot it burned his hands through the wooden foregrip. He had no more grenades, no more explosives. A logical man would have stopped, fallen back, resupplied. But Elwood had seen something during his assault on the fourth bunker. Through the smoke and dust he had spotted Marines from his platoon beginning to move forward. His attack was working. The left flank was advancing. The defensive line's cohesion was breaking. If he stopped now, the remaining 8 pillboxes would pin down those Marines exactly as they had pinned down Elwood's platoon an hour earlier. More men would die in front of those concrete walls. Elwood looked at his ammunition count. 0 magazines, 0 grenades. 8 bunkers remaining. The mathematics no longer made any sense, but Elwood started moving anyway. The 5th pillbox was different, larger than the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. Not as big as the 1st, but this one had something the others lacked: a rear entrance. Japanese defensive engineers had learned from American tactics. Marines liked to assault bunkers from the flanks where the firing slits could not reach. So the engineers built escape routes, tunnels connecting pillboxes to rear trenches. If Americans attacked from one side, defenders could retreat, reposition counterattack from unexpected angles. Elwood did not know about the tunnel. He approached the 5th bunker using the same tactics that had worked before. Find the blind spot, close the distance, neutralize everyone inside. He reached the bunker wall, pressed his back against the concrete, prepared to climb to the roof and find the ventilation shaft. A Japanese soldier came out of the ground 5 yards behind him. The rear tunnel exit was camouflaged with coral rocks and palm fronds. Elwood had walked right past it. The soldier emerged with a bayonet fixed to his Arisaka rifle. The blade was 16 inches long, designed to penetrate and twist. He lunged at Elwood's back. Elwood spun. The movement was pure instinct. No thought, no conscious decision. His body moved before his brain registered the threat. The BAR came up. His finger found the trigger. Nothing happened. The weapon was empty. The Japanese soldier's bayonet was inches from Elwood's chest. Elwood dropped the BAR and grabbed the rifle barrel with both hands. The bayonet point stopped 2 inches from his sternum. The Japanese soldier was stronger. He pushed. The bayonet moved closer, 1 inch from Elwood's chest. Elwood twisted. He used the soldier's momentum against him, redirected the thrust past his ribs. The bayonet cut through his uniform sleeve and scored a line across his bicep. Then Elwood yanked the rifle forward. The Japanese soldier, committed to his thrust, stumbled. Elwood drove his knee into the man's face. Bone crunched. The soldier went down. Elwood picked up the Arisaka rifle. It felt wrong in his hands. Lighter than the bar. Different balance. The bolt action was reversed from American weapons. The Japanese soldier was getting up. Blood poured from his broken nose. He was reaching for something on his belt. Elwood worked the bolt, chambered around, fired. The Arisaka kicked harder than he expected. The report was sharper. The soldier fell backward into the tunnel entrance, but the noise had alerted the bunker's defenders. Elwood heard shouting inside, heard boots scrambling on concrete. He had seconds before more soldiers came through that tunnel. He dropped to one knee and aimed into the tunnel entrance. The narrow passage channeled his shots. Anyone inside would take rounds directly. A face appeared in the darkness. Elwood fired, worked the bolt, fired again. The Arisaka held 5 rounds. He burned through all 5 in 4 seconds. When he stopped shooting, 3 Japanese soldiers lay dead in the tunnel. The 5th pillbox had gone silent. 5 down, 7 remaining. But Elwood's situation had changed. The Japanese in the remaining positions now knew his location. They knew his tactics, and they had radios. Colonel Nakagawa had established a communication network across Peleliu's defensive positions. Each bunker could report to a central command post. The command post could coordinate counterattacks, could redirect fire, could send reinforcements. Elwood did not know that runners were already moving through the Japanese tunnel network. He did not know that Nakagawa's officers had identified the single American who was systematically destroying their southern perimeter. He did not know that the remaining 7 pillboxes had received orders to concentrate their fire on one target. What Elwood knew was simpler. He knew that Marines were advancing on his right. He could hear their rifles. He could see them moving through the coral ridges. His assault had broken the defensive line's cohesion. The Japanese could no longer coordinate their fire against multiple threats. They were reacting instead of controlling. Elwood picked up his BAR from where he had dropped it. He scavenged ammunition from the dead Japanese soldiers. The Arisaka used different rounds, useless for the BAR. But he found something else. 7 Type 97 fragmentation grenades on the bodies of the tunnel defenders. 7 grenades, 7 pillboxes remaining. The mathematics were starting to make sense again. A Marine rifle squad appeared on Elwood's right flank. 6 men who had pushed through the gap Elwood had created. Leading them was Bert Thatcher, the same Montana ranch hand who'd pulled Elwood into a shell crater on D-Day. Bert saw Elwood crouched behind a coral boulder, saw the blood on his arm, saw the empty magazines scattered around his position, saw the 5th pillbox sitting silent behind him. "Kid," Bert shouted, "you all right?" Elwood looked up. For the first time since he started running, he saw friendly faces, men who were not trying to kill him, men who might help. "I'm fine," Elwood said. "You took 5 pillboxes." "Yes." "By yourself." "Yes." Bert stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to his squad. "You heard the man. He did 5. We got 7 to go. Let's move." The Marines fanned out. They were fresh. Relatively. They had ammunition, they had grenades, they had the momentum Elwood had created. But they also had 7 pillboxes still firing at them. The 6th pillbox sat on elevated ground, a coral ridge 15 feet higher than the surrounding terrain. The position gave its defenders excellent visibility. They could see Elwood and the Marine squad from 200 yards away. There was no sneaking up on this one, no blind spot. The Japanese had clear sight lines in every direction. Elwood had 1 magazine left for his bar, 20 rounds. The Marines had perhaps 100 rounds between them. 7 grenades total, including the ones Elwood had taken from the Japanese dead. It was not enough firepower to assault a fortified position on high ground. Bert Thatcher understood the problem immediately. "We need suppressing fire," he said. "Someone pins them down, the rest of us flank." "They'll see the flanking movement," Elwood said. "Then we need a distraction." Elwood looked at the pillbox, looked at his last magazine, looked at the 200 yards of open ground. "I'll be the distraction," he said. "Kid number, you've done enough. I'm the only one who knows how to get close to these things. You flank. I'll keep their attention." Bert started to argue. Then he saw Elwood's face. Saw something there that stopped the argument cold. This was not bravado, not recklessness. This was a 19-year-old who had already committed to dying today, who was simply choosing when and how. "All right," Bert said. "Give us 60 seconds to get in position." Elwood counted to 60. Then he stood up and started walking toward the pillbox. Not running, walking. The Japanese gunners saw him immediately. They opened fire at 150 yards. Bullets kicked up coral around Elwood's feet. He kept walking. At 100 yards he raised the bar and fired a 3-round burst. The bullets sparked off the concrete. The Japanese ducked. Elwood walked closer. At 75 yards, the Japanese fire intensified. Elwood dropped behind a coral formation, waited, stood, walked. The gunners were focused entirely on him. They did not see Bert Thatcher's squad moving along the ridge flank, did not see the Marines climbing the corral from the blind side. At 50 yards, Elwood's magazine ran dry. He dropped the empty bar and pulled one of the Japanese grenades. The Type 97 had a 4-second fuse. He pulled the pin, counted to 2, threw. The grenade fell short, exploded 15 yards from the pillbox. Shrapnel rattled against concrete. But it bought time. Bert Thatcher appeared on the pillbox roof. He shoved a satchel charge into the ventilation shaft, activated the 30-second fuse. Then he ran. The explosion was massive. The elevated position meant the blast wave had nowhere to go but up. Concrete chunks rained down across a 100-yard radius. The pillbox roof collapsed inward. 6 pillboxes destroyed. Approximately 65 Japanese soldiers dead. But the Marine squad had taken casualties. 2 wounded, 1 dead. A private from Nebraska who would never see his 21st birthday. Bert Thatcher had been hit in the shoulder. Blood soaked his uniform. He refused medical attention. "We finish this first," he said. The assault on pillboxes 7 through 9 happened in a blur. Elwood would remember individual moments later, snapshots of violence. But the sequence itself became a confused mess of noise and smoke and blood. He remembered finding a dead Marine near the 7th pillbox, an M1 Garand rifle still in the corpse's hands, 8 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition in the rifle's internal magazine. The Garand used the same caliber as the BAR. Elwood ejected the Garand's clip and hand-loaded the individual rounds into his empty BAR magazine. 40 rounds scavenged from the dead. It was slow work, tedious. His hands shook from adrenaline and exhaustion, but it gave him ammunition. He remembered the 8th pillbox, larger than most. 10 Japanese soldiers inside. He and 3 Marines attacked simultaneously. They threw grenades in sequence, one explosion after another. The defenders had no time to recover between blasts. When the smoke cleared, the pillbox was silent. He remembered the 9th pillbox, the smallest. Only 3 Japanese inside, but they fought with desperate fury, knowing they would die, knowing there was no escape. They threw grenades until they ran out. Then they charged with bayonets. The Marines shot them down at 10 feet. 9 pillboxes destroyed. Approximately 75 Japanese soldiers dead. Elwood checked his ammunition. 12 rounds, 3 grenades, 3 pillboxes remaining. The time was 08:47. 50 minutes had passed since he stood up and started running. 50 minutes that felt like 50 years. Colonel Nakagawa's command post received the reports in real time. 9 defensive positions destroyed in less than an hour. 1 American. 1 Marine who refused to stop. Refused to die. The southern perimeter was collapsing. Nakagawa faced a tactical problem. His defensive doctrine depended on interlocking fields of fire. Each pillbox protected its neighbors. Remove 1 position and the network weakened. Remove 9 and gaps appeared large enough for entire Marine platoons to exploit. The colonel dispatched his reserve force. 40 soldiers from his headquarters company. Their orders were simple: seal the breach, kill the Marine who had caused it, restore the defensive line. The counterattack force emerged from a tunnel entrance 200 yards north of Elwood's position. They moved in 2 columns. No banzai charge, no screaming, just disciplined infantry advancing through the coral ridges with rifles ready. The Marines saw them first. Bert Thatcher, his shoulder still bleeding, raised his rifle. Contact, north 40+ hostiles. Elwood spun, saw the Japanese columns, saw them spreading out into assault formation. Professional soldiers, well-trained, well-led. The Marine squad opened fire, 6 rifles against 40. The mathematics were terrible. Japanese soldiers fell. 5, 8, 10. But more kept coming. They had numbers, they had discipline, and they had orders to retake this ground at any cost. Elwood braced his BAR against a coral outcrop, fired controlled bursts, 5 rounds, pause, 5 rounds, pause. He could not afford to waste ammunition. Every bullet had to count. The Japanese formation scattered. Soldiers dove behind rocks. Others pushed forward, trying to close the distance. Their own fire intensified. Bullets cracked overhead. Coral fragments sprayed Elwood's face. 12 rounds left in his magazine. He fired 6, reloaded his last 6 rounds, fired 3. 3 rounds remaining. The Japanese were 50 yards away and closing. Then the coral ridge behind the Japanese erupted in explosions. Lieutenant Holloway had pushed 3 rifle platoons through the gaps Elwood created. 40 Marines with rifles, bars, and grenades. They had circled behind the Japanese counterattack force. They had waited for the right moment. That moment was now. The Japanese found themselves caught between 2 American forces. Elwood and his squad in front, 40 Marines behind. The crossfire was devastating. Japanese soldiers fell in clusters. Some tried to retreat to their tunnel entrance. Marines cut them down before they reached it. Some tried to surrender. The Marines, remembering 3 days of casualties, shot them anyway. In less than 3 minutes, the counterattack was over. 40 Japanese soldiers lay dead on the coral. The southern perimeter's last reserve was gone. 3 pillboxes remained. And now, Elwood had ammunition. He had grenades. He had 40 Marines ready to follow him into the final positions. The largest bunker complex on the southern peninsula sat 300 yards ahead. 3 pillboxes arranged in a triangle, mutually supporting, heavily manned. The Japanese had concentrated their remaining defenders in this final strong point. Approximately 30 soldiers divided among the 3 bunkers, plus a network of rifle pits and fighting holes connecting the positions. Elwood checked his weapon, checked his grenades, looked at the Marines forming up around him. The last fight was about to begin. Standard Marine doctrine called for preparatory bombardment before assaulting a fortified position of this size. Naval gunfire, air support. At minimum, a barrage from the regiment's mortar platoon. None of that was available. The naval guns had moved on to support operations elsewhere. Marine corsairs were busy attacking targets on the northern ridges. The mortar teams could not fire without hitting the Marines already in the area. 43 Americans would take the triangle with rifles, grenades, and 1 man who had already proven that concrete walls could not stop him. Lieutenant Holloway organized the assault in less than 2 minutes. He used hand signals, pointed at positions, divided the Marines into 3 groups. Each group would attack 1 pillbox simultaneously. Coordinated assault. Overwhelming force. Elwood would take the center bunker, the largest one, the one with the best fields of fire. The Marines moved out at 08:52. They had been fighting for over an hour. The temperature had climbed past 110 degrees. Dehydration was becoming a factor. Several men showed signs of heat exhaustion. They kept moving anyway. Elwood led his group of 12 Marines toward the center pillbox. The approach required crossing 60 yards of open ground. No cover, no concealment, just volcanic rock baked white by the Pacific sun. The Japanese opened fire when the Marines were halfway across. 2 men fell in the first 3 seconds. 1 dead. 1 wounded in the leg. The remaining 10 kept running. They had learned from Elwood's earlier assaults. Speed was survival. Hesitation was death. Elwood reached the bunker wall first. He pressed against the concrete and pulled the pin on a Japanese grenade. The Type 97 had a 4-second fuse. He counted to 2, threw the grenade through the firing slit, ducked. The explosion silenced 1 machine gun, but the bunker had 2 firing positions. The second gun kept shooting. Marines outside were dying. Elwood pulled another grenade, counted, threw, Another explosion. The second gun went quiet. He climbed to the roof and found the ventilation shaft, shoved his BAR into the opening, emptied his magazine into the darkness below. Screams echoed up through the concrete, then silence. The center pillbox was dead. On his left, the first assault group had reached their target. A Marine corporal had shoved a satchel charge through the firing slit. The explosion collapsed half the bunker's roof. Japanese survivors stumbled out into Marine rifle fire. On his right, the third group was struggling. Their pillbox had a reinforced entrance facing away from the Marine advance. Japanese soldiers inside were throwing grenades faster than the Americans could close the distance. The Marines were pinned down, taking casualties. Elwood did not hesitate. He sprinted across the open ground between bunkers, 40 yards of no man's land. Bullets kicked up coral around his feet. A round grazed his thigh. He kept running. He reached the third pillbox from its blind side. The same blind side the Marines could not approach because of the entrance on the opposite wall. Elwood found the ventilation shaft. He had 2 grenades left. He dropped them both into the opening. The explosions killed everyone inside. 3 pillboxes destroyed in less than 4 minutes. The triangle had fallen. But Elwood was bleeding. The bullet that grazed his thigh had cut deeper than he realized. Blood soaked his dungaree trousers. His left leg was weakening with every step. He looked south. The remaining 3 pillboxes stood between the Marines and complete control of the southern peninsula. But these 3 were different. Isolated, no mutual support. The defensive network had been shattered. Lieutenant Holloway appeared beside Elwood, saw the blood, saw his face grey with blood loss. "Kincaid, you're done. Get to the aid station." "3 more, sir." "That's an order, Private." Elwood looked at the 3 pillboxes, looked at his BAR, looked at Lieutenant Holloway. "With respect, sir, I'm finishing this." The 10th pillbox fell at 0912. 5 Japanese defenders. Elwood killed them with grenades dropped through the ventilation shaft. His leg was still bleeding. He had wrapped a torn piece of dungaree fabric around the wound. It was not enough. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage with every step. The 11th pillbox fell at 0921. This one required help. Elwood's ammunition was exhausted. A Marine private brought up a satchel charge. Elwood placed it. The explosion killed 7 Japanese soldiers. The 12th pillbox was the last. It sat on a small rise overlooking the beach where the 7th Marines had landed 3 days earlier. The position had been firing on Marine supply parties since D-Day. Its 2 machine guns had killed at least 15 Americans. The bunker's commander had watched 11 pillboxes fall that morning. He knew he was next. Elwood approached from the northeast. His leg had stopped responding properly. He was dragging it more than walking. Blood loss was affecting his vision. The coral ridges seemed to shimmer in the 100-degree heat. 3 Marines followed him. They had refused to let him assault the final position alone. 1 carried extra grenades, 1 carried a flamethrower, 1 carried a bar with ammunition to spare. The Japanese opened fire at 100 yards. The Marine with the BAR returned fire. Suppressive bursts that forced the enemy gunners to duck. Elwood and the other 2 kept moving. At 50 yards, the flamethrower operator stepped forward. The M2 flamethrower had an effective range of 40 yards. He needed to get closer. Elwood provided cover. He took the BAR from the supporting Marine and fired in controlled bursts. The weapon kicked against his shoulder. His wounded leg buckled. He dropped to one knee and kept shooting. The flamethrower operator reached effective range. He triggered a 3-second burst. Burning fuel arced through the air and poured into the pillbox's firing slit. The screaming lasted less than 10 seconds. At 0933, the 12th pillbox fell silent. Elwood collapsed against a coral boulder. His dungarees were soaked with blood. His hands shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. His BAR lay across his lap barrel, still hot from the final assault. In approximately 90 minutes, Private First Class Elwood Kincaid had destroyed 12 Japanese pillboxes. He had killed approximately 50 enemy soldiers. He had broken the southern defensive line. He had enabled his platoon's advance. He had changed the tactical situation on an entire sector of the island. Navy corpsmen reached him within minutes. They cut away his blood-soaked trousers and dressed the wound. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or artery. Elwood would keep his leg. He would also keep fighting. 3 days later, still limping, Elwood Kincaid was back in combat. Word of Elwood's assault spread through the 7th Marines within hours. Officers who had watched the attack from observation posts described what they had seen. A single Marine charging positions that should have required company-level assaults. Pillboxes falling one after another. 50 Japanese dead. 200 Marines advancing through gaps one 19-year-old had created with a rifle and grenades. The regimental commander forwarded a report to division headquarters that same afternoon. The report was brief, clinical, but the numbers told a story that needed no embellishment. Private First Class Elwood Kincaid, serial number 482956, did single-handedly assault and destroy 12 enemy pillboxes on September 18, 1944. Estimated enemy casualties 50 killed. Friendly casualties directly prevented by this action estimated 200. Kincaid sustained minor wounds but refused evacuation. Returned to duty after field treatment. Division forwarded the report to Corps. Corps forwarded it to Fleet Headquarters. By the time Peleliu was declared secure on November 27th, Elwood Kincaid's name had reached the desk of Admiral Chester Nimitz. The Medal of Honor recommendation was submitted in early October, but Elwood knew nothing about that. He was too busy fighting. The battle for Peleliu continued for another 70 days after Elwood's assault. The Marines pushed north into the Umabrogol Mountains. The Japanese called them the Bloody Nose Ridge. 500 yards of coral peaks honeycombed with caves. Perfect defensive terrain. Colonel Nakagawa withdrew his remaining forces into those peaks. He had started with 10,000 men. By late September, he had perhaps 6,000 combat effective. But those 6,000 were dug into positions the Marines could only take with flamethrowers and satchel charges. 1 cave at a time, 1 yard at a time. Elwood fought in those mountains. His wounded leg slowed him down but did not stop him. The corpsman had given him a walking stick carved from driftwood. He used it to climb the coral ridges, used it to steady his aim when his leg gave out. Bert Thatcher stayed close. His shoulder wound had been worse than Elwood's leg. The bullet had chipped his collarbone. But like Elwood, he refused evacuation. "Can't let you get all the glory, kid," Bert said. They fought together through October, through November, watched men die in caves filled with poison gas, watched Marines burn Japanese soldiers alive with flamethrowers because there was no other way to clear the positions. War stopped being noble somewhere in those mountains, stopped being about duty or honor or fighting back for fallen fathers. It became about survival, about killing the enemy before he killed you, about going home. On November 24th, Colonel Nakagawa sent his final message to Tokyo. "Our sword is broken and our jewels are gone. We have no strength left to fight." Then he committed ritual suicide in his command bunker. His remaining defenders fought for 3 more days. The battle ended on November 27th. Total American casualties 9,804. Of those, 1,794 were killed in action. The 1st Marine Division, which had landed with 17,490 men, suffered 6,526 casualties, more than a third of its strength. The Japanese lost all 10,900 defenders. Only 202 were taken prisoner. The rest died. Peleliu Island, which Major General Rupertus had promised to secure in 4 days, had taken 74. Elwood Kincaid survived all 74 days. He boarded the transport ship on November 28th with the rest of the 7th Marines. He carried his BAR, his walking stick, and a duffel bag containing everything he owned. He did not speak during the voyage back to Pavuvu. Other Marines tried to talk to him, tried to celebrate survival. Elwood sat on deck and stared at the ocean. Bert Thatcher sat beside him on the 3rd day. "You thinking about the pillboxes?" "No." "What then? How many we lost? How many didn't come back?" "You saved 200 kid. That counts." "Does it? 200 versus 1800. The math doesn't work." Bert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The 200 who lived because of you, they think it works." Elwood nodded, but he did not look convinced. The war ended before Elwood received his medal. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Elwood was at Camp Pendleton when he heard the news. He felt nothing. No joy, no relief. Just a vague sense that something was over. His mother, Dorothy Kincaid, traveled from Portland for the ceremony. She had aged 10 years in the 2 years Elwood had been gone. Her hair had gone completely grey. The welding job at the shipyard had given her permanent burns on her forearms. She cried when she saw Elwood at Union Station, held him for 5 minutes without speaking. When she finally pulled back, she touched the scar on his thigh. "They told me you were wounded." "It's nothing, Ma." "Don't lie to me, Elwood." He looked at his mother, saw the woman who had raised him alone after Pearl Harbor, who had worked 60-hour weeks to keep food on the table, who had never complained, never asked why her husband had to die. "I'm all right," he said. "I promise." The ceremony was held in the East Room of the White House. 13 Medal of Honor recipients stood in line: Marines, soldiers, sailors. All of them had done something impossible. All of them had survived to receive recognition. President Harry Truman moved down the line, shook each man's hand, read citations aloud, placed medals around necks. When he reached Elwood, Truman paused, looked at the citation, looked at Elwood's face. 19 years old when you did this?" "Yes, sir, Mr. President." 12 pillboxes, 50 enemy killed, 90 minutes. "Yes, sir." Truman shook his head slowly. "The country owes you a debt it can never repay, son." Elwood stood at attention while the president draped the Medal of Honor around his neck. The medal hung heavy, heavier than it should have been. The ribbon was light blue with 13 white stars. The medal itself was a bronze star surrounded by a laurel wreath. The word Valor embossed across the top. Dorothy Kincaid cried in the audience. Photographers took pictures. Reporters asked questions. Elwood answered in monosyllables. "Yes. No. I just did my job." That night in the hotel room, Dorothy asked him what was wrong. "You should be proud," she said. "The whole country's proud of you." "I know, Ma. But you're not proud." Elwood looked at the Medal of Honor sitting on the dresser. The bronze gleamed in the lamplight. "I killed 50 men," he said. "Maybe more. I didn't count after a while. And now they give me a medal for it. Tell me I'm a hero. But those 50 men, they had mothers too. They had lives, and I ended them." "They were trying to kill you." "I know. That's what makes it worse. They were doing their job. I was doing mine, and the job was killing." Dorothy stood, walked to her son, put her hand on his shoulder. "Your father died at Pearl Harbor," she said. "He never got to fight back, never got to defend himself. You fought back, Elwood. You defended yourself and 200 other boys who got to go home to their mothers. That's not something to be ashamed of." "Then why do I feel ashamed?" Dorothy had no answer for that. Elwood came home to Oregon in January 1946. The 7th Marines had been deactivated. He received an honorable discharge and a train ticket to Portland. Dorothy met him at the station. She had cooked bacon and eggs for breakfast the next morning. Real bacon, not the rationed meat substitute they'd eaten during the war. 6 thick strips sizzling in her cast-iron skillet. The smell filled the kitchen. Elwood sat at the table and watched her cook. The kitchen was the same as he remembered. Same yellow curtains, same chipped tile floor, same wooden table where he'd eaten breakfast before leaving for boot camp. Everything was the same, except him. Dorothy plated 3 strips of bacon for Elwood, added 2 eggs fried in the bacon fat, toast with real butter, a luxury after 4 years of war. Elwood picked up his fork, cut a piece of bacon, put it in his mouth. The bacon was perfect, crispy on the outside. The fat melted across his tongue like warm silk, salt and smoke, and the subtle sweetness of caramelization. The kind of breakfast men dream about in foxholes. Elwood chewed, swallowed, put down his fork. Dorothy was watching him. "You don't like it? It's good, Ma. Then why'd you stop eating?" Elwood looked at the bacon on his plate, looked at his mother. She had lost weight during the war. Rationing had been hard on everyone. She'd sent half her rations to the troops overseas, to boys like Elwood. "I was thinking about Peleliu," he said, "about the Marines who didn't come home, about what they'd give for bacon and eggs." Dorothy set down her spatula, sat across from Elwood. "They'd want you to eat," she said. "They'd want you to live." "Would they?" "Yes." Elwood picked up his fork again, ate the bacon, ate the eggs, finished breakfast because his mother expected him to, but he couldn't taste any of it. The food was ash in his mouth. It would be 65 years before that changed. Elwood took a job with the United States Postal Service in February 1946, mail carrier, Route 7 in Bend, Oregon, 5 days a week. Same houses, same people, same routine. He liked the routine, liked the predictability, liked that nobody shot at him. The Medal of Honor sat in a box in his closet. He never wore it, never displayed it. When people asked about his war service, he said he'd been in the Marines, left it at that. Most people didn't push for details. He met Sarah Brennan in 1947. She worked as a nurse at St. Charles Hospital. They were married in 1948, had 2 children, Michael in 1950, Jennifer in 1952. Elwood never told his children about Peleliu, never mentioned the 12 pillboxes or the 50 Japanese soldiers or the 90 minutes that changed everything. Sarah knew. She'd seen the scar on his leg, seen the medal in the closet. She asked once. Elwood said he didn't want to talk about it. She never asked again. He was a good father, present, attentive. He taught Michael how to fish, taught Jennifer how to ride a bike, went to every school play and baseball game, coached Little League for 6 years. But there was a distance. His children felt it even if they couldn't name it. A part of their father that was somewhere else, somewhere they couldn't reach. Michael asked about it once when he was 16. "Dad, were you a hero in the war?" They were in the garage. Elwood was changing the oil in the family Ford. Michael was handing him tools. "Who told you that?" "Jimmy Patterson's dad. He said you got the Medal of Honor." Elwood wiped his hands on a rag, looked at his son. "I did my job," he said. "That's all." "But the Medal of Honor means you did something brave. It means I survived something I shouldn't have. That's different from brave." "I don't understand." "You don't need to." Elwood finished changing the oil, never spoke about it again. The invitation came in March 2011. The Navy had commissioned an amphibious assault ship named USS Peleliu in 1980, LHA-5. 31 years later, the ship was still in active service. The commanding officer invited all surviving Medal of Honor recipients from the battle to visit the ship and speak to the crew. Elwood was 86 years old. Sarah had died 2 years earlier. Cancer. He lived alone in the house they'd shared for 63 years. His children called twice a week, visited once a month, worried about him living by himself. He almost declined the invitation. Told himself he was too old, too tired, that he had nothing to say to young sailors and Marines who hadn't been born when Peleliu happened. But Michael convinced him to go. "Dad, those kids need to hear your story, need to know what you did." "They don't need to know anything from me." "Yes, they do. You've been quiet for 67 years. Maybe it's time to speak." Elwood flew to San Diego in April. A Navy car picked him up from the airport and drove him to the ship. The USS Peleliu was massive, 820 feet long, 40,000 tons, capable of carrying 1,800 Marines. Nothing like the transport ships Elwood remembered. The ship's captain met him at the gangway, Commander James Riley, 42 years old, 3 combat deployments. "Mr. Kincaid, it's an honor to have you aboard." "Just Elwood is fine." "I've read your citation, sir. What you did that day, I can't imagine. Most days I try not to." The crew had assembled in the hangar bay. More than 1,000 sailors and Marines in dress uniforms. They stood at attention when Elwood entered. The captain introduced him, read the Medal of Honor citation aloud. "Private First Class Elwood Kincaid for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while serving with the 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division on Peleliu Island, September 18, 1944. The citation took 5 minutes to read. Elwood stood on the platform and listened to his life reduced to 400 words, 12 pillboxes, 90 minutes, 50 enemy killed, 200 Americans saved. The numbers sounded different when spoken aloud. When the captain finished, he turned to Elwood. "Would you like to say anything, sir?" Elwood looked at the 1,000 young faces staring up at him, boys and girls young enough to be his great-grandchildren. Most of them had deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. Most of them had seen combat. They knew what war was. "I don't know what to tell you," Elwood began. "The captain read what I did, the official version. But that's not what I remember most about that day." He paused, gathered his thoughts. "What I remember most is the 14-pound canned ham my mess sergeant made me carry during the landing. Heavy as hell. I complained about it for 3 days, thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever had to do, carry a ham through combat." A few sailors laughed. "I never ate that ham," Elwood continued. "Lost it somewhere in the coral on day 2. And for 67 years I've thought about that ham, about complaining about carrying it, about all the petty things that seemed important before September 18th. The hangar bay was silent now. The truth is, I didn't think I was being brave that day. I thought I was going to die. And I was scared, terrified. But I was more scared of watching my friends die while I did nothing. So I stood up. And once I stood up, I couldn't stop, because stopping meant they'd die. And I couldn't live with that." He looked across the assembled crew. "Some of you have seen combat. Some of you will. And when you do, you'll be scared. Anyone who says they're not scared is lying. But being scared doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. What makes you a Marine or a sailor or a soldier, that's what you do when you're scared." Elwood paused, felt something catch in his throat, an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. "Don't remember me for the 50 men I killed," he said. "Remember me for the 200 who lived. That's what matters. Not who you fight, not who you kill, but who you save." The applause started before he finished. 1,000 people clapping, some crying. Afterward, the captain presented Elwood with a flag. one of only 2 Medal of Honor flags each recipient receives. Blue field, 13 white stars, the same pattern as the medal's ribbon. "We'd like to display this in the ship's Hall of Heroes," the captain said, "alongside the photographs of the 8 Marines who earned the Medal of Honor at Peleliu. You're the last survivor, sir." Elwood looked at the flag, looked at the captain. "The last?" "Yes, sir. The other 7 have passed. You're the only one left who was there." Elwood held the flag, felt the weight of it, the weight of being the last voice, the last witness. "Then I better make sure I tell it right," he said. Elwood returned to Bend after the USS Peleliu visit. Something had changed. He couldn't name it, couldn't quantify it. But the weight he'd carried for 67 years felt lighter. He started speaking at schools, veterans groups, anyone who asked. He told them about Peleliu, about the pillboxes, about being 19 and scared and standing up anyway. But he also told them about coming home, about bacon and eggs he couldn't taste, about the years of silence, about the cost of surviving when others didn't. "War doesn't end when the shooting stops," he told a high school history class in 2013. "It follows you home, lives in your kitchen while you eat breakfast, sits beside you at your daughter's wedding. You learn to live with it, but it never really leaves." A student asked if he regretted what he did. "Every day," Elwood said, "but I'd do it again, because the alternative was watching my friends die, and I couldn't live with that." Elwood Kincaid died in his sleep on June 14, 2017. He was 92 years old. His son Michael found him in the morning. Peaceful. No pain. The funeral was held at the Idaho State Veterans Cemetery in Boise. Elwood had moved there in 2015 to be closer to Jennifer. Full military honors. Marine Corps body bearers from Bravo Company Marine Barracks, Washington. 21-gun salute. Taps played at sunset. 300 people attended. Family, friends, veterans from 6 wars, strangers who'd heard Elwood speak and wanted to pay respects. Bert Thatcher came in a wheelchair, 93 years old, cancer eating him from the inside. He'd flown from Montana against his doctor's orders. They wheeled him to the graveside. He placed his hand on the flag-draped casket. "You weren't a hero, El," Bert whispered. "You were just a good man who couldn't sit still when your friends needed you, and that's better than being a hero." The Marines folded the flag, presented it to Michael. The rifles fired. The bugle played. They lowered Elwood Kincaid into the ground as the sun set over Idaho. In the kitchen of Elwood's house in Bend, Oregon, Michael Kincaid found something while cleaning out his father's belongings. A journal, leather-bound, every page filled with his father's handwriting. Michael opened it at random, read an entry from 1948. "Cooked bacon this morning. Dorothy says I need to eat. I tried. Still can't taste it. She doesn't understand. How can I enjoy bacon when better men than me are dead? When they never got bacon again. When they never got anything again." Another entry from 1975. "Michael graduated high school today. I'm proud of him. Vernon would be proud too. But I can't help thinking about the Marines who died on Peleliu. They never got to see their sons graduate, never got to be fathers. I got 74 more years than they did. Doesn't seem fair." And then an entry from 2011, written after the USS Peleliu visit. "I spoke to 1,000 sailors today, told them about September 18, 1944, told them about being scared, about standing up anyway. And something strange happened. After 67 years, I finally tasted the bacon. Not literally, but metaphorically. I finally understood that surviving isn't a sin, that living when others died isn't betrayal. It's responsibility. Responsibility to remember, to tell the story, to make sure they're not forgotten. I'm 86 years old. I've lived 73 years past Peleliu, and I finally understand what Dorothy tried to tell me in 1946. The men who died They'd want me to live. They'd want me to enjoy bacon. They'd want me to be proud of what I did. So today I'm proud, not of the violence, but of the courage to stand up when standing up meant dying. Proud that I finally understand what Dorothy tried to tell me. I'm proud I stood up when it mattered. Michael closed the journal, looked at the Medal of Honor on the table, the bronze star surrounded by laurel, the word valor embossed across the top. He understood now. His father wasn't a hero because he killed 50 men. He was a hero because he saved 200, because he stood up when no one else would, because he spent 90 minutes in hell so others could go home. And then he spent 73 years remembering them. Elwood Kincaid, Private First Class, United States Marine Corps, 12 pillboxes, 90 minutes, 50 enemy killed, 200 Americans saved. September 18th, 1944 to June 14th, 2017. One good man who couldn't sit still when his friends needed him.